I played too many games over the holidays. In particular, I got really into some of the more cerebral games I missed from the last year. Some favourites were Opus Magnum, the Sexy Brutale, and Fidel Dungeon Rescue. That's when it hit me. Despite being very disparate in terms of mechanics, theming, and the methods of player interaction, all of these games fall under the broad label of puzzle games. And I think that does them a disservice, because both designers and players approach these games in very different ways. Now, the idea that there's a separate genre that budded off of puzzle games isn't new, but I feel like when people talk about it, they really only highlight the phenomena without really unpacking what it means. And what it really comes down to is whether players can or cannot engage with the authorial intent of the designer, and all the knock-on effects this has. First of all, let's break down some ideas. What the hell even is a puzzle? Well, I think it's best explained as a question or challenge posed to someone with the definitive answer at the end that is known by the person who asked it. The Witness is a great example of this. In the Orchard level, we quickly learn that the solution to these puzzle panels is to match the line to whichever branch has an apple. So, what happens when we find a tree with no apple because some of the branches have snapped off? Our accumulated knowledge so far tells us that it has to be somewhere, and look, there it is, complete with an apple. After that, it's just a matter of finding the one branch that is on the panel that isn't on the tree. The correct answer. It's up to John Blow as the puzzle designer to teach you how to answer it by giving you the rules and the resources you need to work everything out. This little journey from being confused to getting the twist on the puzzle's formula to finding the answer is clearly an intentional vision on Blow's part that he conveys to the player through the puzzle's design, and it serves to heighten the satisfaction we get from solving the puzzle by making us feel like we've triumphed in spite of the twist. But things aren't always that simple, are they? A lot of the time, there is no single answer. This is what I'm choosing to call a problem. Problems are defined by their open-endedness. A great example from video games would be pretty much any Zachtronics game. Something like Opus Magnum just hands you some ingredients and a rule set and asks you to get the job done with very little oversight from Zach himself. The desired result can be achieved in a variety of ways, from highly optimized and sophisticated to whatever I managed to cobble together here. Now, a lot of people will say that these games really ought to just be called simulations, and they're kind of right, but I feel like despite their open-ended nature, these games are still goal-focused and with a rising curve of difficulty and complexity that warrants their distinction from the likes of flight sims and that one train game with £1 million of DLC. Puzzles are to problems what building a Lego house by the instructions in the little booklet with just the right pieces you need is to tipping out a whole box of them and designing the house yourself. At the end of both processes, you end up with a house. Hell, it's possible you might end up with two very similar houses, but the way you got there and the thought patterns involved are very different. There's a very important distinction to make between these kinds of games, because although they may seem cosmetically similar, there's a lot of different stuff going on under the hood. In terms of authorship, for puzzle games like Portal or the Sexy Brutale, you're following someone else's story and experiencing what they want you to experience. In problem games, you're in charge of constructing an experience yourself, you are the author. Someone else just gave you the tools to become one. But why are problem games more hands-off? That's because the developers can't know what you're going to do with any degree of certainty. There's simply too many possible options. In games with maybe 2 or 3 fairly similar solutions to a single puzzle, like this one in Portal 2 that allows you to cheat, writing and coding in options to cater to each solution is pretty manageable.
Every test chamber is equipped with an emancipation grill at its exit, so that test subjects cannot smuggle test objects out of the test area. This one is broken. Don't take anything with you. I think that one was about to say, I love you.
But in Spacechem, for example, where almost every solution past the opening few will be in some way different, doing that is just impossible. This means that developers of problem games, if they want to tell a story, have to do it through non-interactive means like blocks of text or audio diaries that are functionally separate from the actual game. Though it's not all bad. In Factorio, the whole game is this giant meta problem of how you're going to build a rocket to escape the planet. And this leads to some awesome stories with zero direct input from the developers, such as the unique way my factory took shape and how I gradually jury-rigged and mutated it to fit my ever-increasing hunger for iron gears, and the best part? No one had an experience or a story quite like mine. That's the key difference. Puzzle games are linear, authorial experiences intended to be played once, Problem games are open-ended sandboxes with an arbitrarily high number of possible solutions, allowing players to craft their own experience. Phrased like this, it seems pretty silly to lump them in the same group, right? That's not to say a game can't be both puzzle and a problem at the same time. As I go on about in my modular genre video, there's no need to divide these games quite so strictly. There are lots of cases where a more free-form problem game is intentionally modified to portray a highly specific game state in order to teach a lesson. A great example are these puzzles in digital card games like Eternal, which are usually much more problem focused during normal play. These little snapshots teach players some of the more weird interactions between cards within the context of a single turn, which the player can then go on to use in the main game. Let's look at a few examples of each type of game and deconstruct some advantages and disadvantages to these two schools of thought. One of the best examples of puzzle games communicating with the player is Portal's companion cube. The moment the cube is introduced, it becomes a key factor in your decision making as you unpack how to solve Test Chamber 17. The fact that the companion cube exists at all and is given such fanfare is the designers communicating to you that you're going to have to use it to get on top of platforms, deflect these energy pellets and hold down buttons, which, coincidentally, is the solution for all the puzzles in the chamber, which are actually quite easy, for reasons that will become apparent. At the end, GLaDOS asks the player to destroy the cube. Now, we know that the cube should have no gameplay benefits anymore, but the cube euthanization scene has a way of getting in people's heads. Everyone I've seen play the game will try and find a way to bring the cube with them, either to spite GLaDOS, to save their new best friend, or because they think it's got some sort of secret hidden use. Invariably, these people are forced to give up and incinerate the companion cube to progress, getting the same droll response from GLaDOS.
You euthanized your faithful companion cube more quickly than any test subject on record. Congratulations.
See, the real puzzle isn't Chamber 17, but how to save the companion cube, a challenge the player must fail in order to progress. It is an absolutely fantastic way to knock the player down a peg and really stoke their motivation for beating the game. You'll be surprised at just how many puzzle games do this, using the design of the puzzles to tug at the player's heartstrings. A great example of this is these supposedly unwinnable bits in Final Dungeon Rescue where your owner gets kidnapped. They provide new players with some emotional motivation and reward the knowledge of experienced ones by letting them exploit the puzzle to find secrets. Just as Chell and GLaDOS have a constant dialogue, of sorts, the designer and the player are also having a conversation, one of mutual understanding and the occasional joke at the player's expense.
At all, does any of this make any sense? Just tell me, just say yes. Okay, what you're doing there is jumping. You just jumped. But never mind, say apple. Apple. Okay, you know what? That's close enough. Just hold tight.
Without the tightly controlled series of events that leads to the destruction of a pure lovely friend, the companion cube scene would have been impossible to implement. Most games achieve this by restricting what the player can do. It's why as the levels get more difficult in Portal, stuff like unportalable surfaces, one-way level transitions and death traps become more common, to keep you on the intended path, doing things the way the designers intended. Let's change track and look at a problem game that uses the same core gimmick as Portal, Bridge Constructor Portal. Just like its big brother, we're sending things through velocity conserving portals and sometimes using cubes to hold down buttons, the same sort of things you've no doubt seen before. In theory, Bridge Constructor should be a game where there's a bunch of different ways to achieve your goals, as opposed to puzzlers which are all about finding what the developer wants you to do, and to an extent this is true. Take level 18. You've got to use this blue bouncy gel to propel your little portal truck up onto this platform, knock over this turret, and use this bounce pad thing to boost you up to the exit. You might not have spotted the bounce pad until I told you it was there, and that's fine, because neither did I. Despite missing a fairly crucial aspect of the puzzle, I managed to create a self-supporting bridge that totally bypassed the need for it. Not only that, after a few tweaks, my bridge was good enough to beat the optional harder difficulty. However, Bridge Constructor Portal is unhealthily shackled to the legacy of the franchise. And no, I'm not talking about reusing 10-year-old jokes. In BCP, you're clearly led by the nose to a given solution. All of the bridge connection points are fixed and placed in such a way that your bridge is always going to be a certain shape no matter what. And then you've got the turrets, barriers and portals themselves, which serve as means of restricting the scope of your construction rather than facilitating interesting solutions, just like in Portal. This is a shame because there's a lot of potential in the Bridge Constructor engine that just isn't reflected in the level design. For a problem game that sprinkles in just a bit of puzzly influence we need look no further than World of Goo. In World of Goo, you've got to build structures by connecting up these adorable little goo creatures. World of Goo often presents you with a single broad challenge like make a really tall tower, get over this huge gap, or climb out of this ravine. In each level, the finicky physics of the goo balls and stuff like wind makes improvisation and last minute adjustments to your buildings a must, eliminating the possibility of a de facto walkthrough and constantly challenging your construction knowledge. The great strength of problem solving games is that you aren't constrained by the linearity that acts as the foundation for any good puzzle game. By messing around with the mechanics you can do just about anything. But this will always come at the expense of the author's power to deliver you a handcrafted experience. As much as I like them, I've never finished a Zachtronics game, simply because there's nothing in them to encourage me to play. This is one of the big areas where problem games can fall down. Unless you're a very skilled designer, it's hard to get players to form the same visceral emotional connections that really gets puzzle games to stick with you. Think of all the great stories and characters that appear in puzzle games compared to, the red line in Spacechem? See what I mean? That's not to say that puzzlers are always going to have good, engaging stories. A writer of a puzzle game, perhaps more so than any other genre, needs to be clued into exactly how their would-be audience thinks. The Sexy Brutale leans heavily on the player's morbid curiosity to see all the weird and gruesome death scenes. Most of the clues you'll need to eventually solve the puzzle and save your friend are hidden in their ultra-stylish deaths. Some moderate non-story spoilers for the Sexy Brutale, by the way. Willow, who ends up hanging herself in dramatic fashion, drops a key that opens a chest containing instructions on how to operate a mysterious charm. Sixpence is shot, hinting to the observant player to go and check out that gun display cabinet in their next attempt. Unfortunately, when game designers miss the mark, it's very hard to go back to their frame of mind because puzzle games are so specific. It's what's often called moon logic, a term I don't really like, but it's pretty established, so what the hey. Take Tequila the Singer. She dies because one of the casino workers has rigged the piano to cause the stained glass window behind her to explode at the crescendo of her song, fatally wounding her. Yeah, it's a bit far-fetched. The solution to this puzzle is to grab the vinyl, play it on a gramophone in the storage room to distract the staff member, and then while he's gone, you nip in, grab the key, and lock him inside. Now, that'll kind of make sense when you can see the whole thing in action, but it requires some serious leaps of logic, or blind experimentation in my case, to get it to work, dragging you out of the story and robbing you of the satisfaction and emotion behind this really quite good post-level scene. Moon logic is a real problem in point and clicks in particular, where you're often dealing with more than one puzzle at once, making it way harder for the developer to communicate with the player and tell them what to do. Telltale has quite famously ditched puzzles in their games almost entirely to focus on the stories they actually want to tell. The last thing I want keeping me from spending more time with Loaderbot is a boring inventory puzzle, and Telltale knows it. I think in general, puzzle and problem game designers are becoming more and more aware of the division between these two kinds of games, and how the unique connection between designer and player, or lack thereof, can lead to vastly different experiences. However, the more important takeaway, as is tradition on this channel, is on the player side of things. Not only will learning about the differences between puzzles and problems help us better pick games that cater to what we're looking for, it'll also help us out when we're actually playing them. When playing puzzlers, we need to abandon our biases and look out for what the designers are trying to tell us the solution is, not what we think it should be. For problem solvers, we need to have a strong grasp on the mechanics and then be able to open our minds to think laterally and come up with a creative, efficient or fun solution to whatever the hell we've got to do. Puzzle games are not going away anytime soon, and thanks to people like Zach Barth, 2D Boy and any one of the great devs who are part of the weirdly populated sub-genre of bridge building construction based problem games, neither are problem solvers. And a good thing too, because if my bridge building skills are anything to go by, then I shouldn't be let anywhere near game development.